Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. This is going to be a bit morbid, so trigger warning. If you have not come to peace with morbidity and mortality and that kind of things, this might not be the episode for you. I was having a conversation with my parents, amicable, nothing bad about it, and they started mentioning where their grave plot was and asked how often I was going to visit them. Now, let me be clear. I believe in an eternal afterlife. It's not something foreign to my concept, but visiting a dead body that's already been planted in the ground, I'm aware people do it. My parents visited their parents, left flowers and stuff like that every year on the anniversary. Now, this is a coping mechanism for a lot of people. One day someone's there, the next day they're gone forever. And you do that to connect with them, to try to feel a bit of their spark, their spirit within your own heart. Myself, I don't like to say this, I've been through a lot of death. I've kind of come to peace with it. It's not a remarkable skill, and I'm sure it's psychologically one of the factors why I'm a little bit messed up and see things differently than most people. But whereas they find it questionable why I would not want to visit the places where their corpses are decomposing and turning into worm poop and fertilizing the plants, I find that culture, that tradition, a little bit off. My parents are products of the 40s and 50s and 60s, of course. They were absolutely influenced by it. So I do understand their values are far more traditional than mine would ever possibly be. And I understand the purpose of a funeral. Absolutely, it's to get family together. I think the Jewish tradition of Shiva, where you spend 7 days basically sitting around the house telling stories and having people visit you, I think that's marvelous from a psychological point of view. You have cause to be there. You have reasons for relatives and friends to drop by and give you food and stuff like that. And it's a period of mourning, a prescribed period of mourning. Nowadays, you get a day off for the funeral, you expect to be off at work the next day. I'll admit, that is definitely not at all psychologically helpful. But never said corporations were supposed to be helpful. They're there to make a profit. They don't care what happens to you. But this idea of visiting a corpse, I guess it goes back to like famous and mythical people. Excuse me. Let's take, one of the former kings where their tombs are visited constantly. Famous activists like Gandhi or somebody like that. Yes, thousands of people were visiting Stalin's tomb a day because it was in Red Square. Stalin knew how to put on a performance, whatever you want to say about him. But whereas I honestly don't think the spirit is up there in heaven keeping tallies on how many times you visited their grave. I don't think that's going to give you bonus points to wind up wherever you're going to go. I think it's a purely personal choice, and a choice that's up to the individual. I know I'm not going to be choosing that option very often, if at all. And that's, again, purely my choice. There's a religious tendency, oh, you must, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. There's a funerary requirement for morticians, but as a society, we're really unsure what to do as so-called adult human beings when it comes to mourning. We teach a lot of classes in school, and people have complained, you know, home economics is no longer being taught, how to cook, how to do a budget, and stuff like that. But we're also not taught how to mourn. This actually winds up being a major issue for a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists, especially if a parent or a friend died relatively young, and you're forced to confront this before you really have a chance. Now, we're lucky to live in the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic world where most of our people live to a relatively old age compared to other societies, and we see them start dropping, and we come to accept it in our lives. In countries that aren't quite so democratic and free, they see a lot of death going on too, whether a result of their own countrymen or from invasions, airstrikes, or just poor quality of life. They develop very different mourning mechanisms than what we have. But the important thing is that you remember the people in your heart. You remember their kindness. You remember the love and joy that they brought to your life. And sometimes you have to remember the bad things. That, I think, is the important lesson, not how many times you visit a grave. Because, like I said, that's not whether I become a ghost, whether I become an angel, whether I become a spirit, probably not hanging out on my gravestone. They're not very well. Some of them are very nice places. Most of them are pretty well guarded and maintained. But I'm more curious to look at other things happening. I have complete freedom to go where I wanted. I want to find out some stuff. So visiting me in the grave, I guess it's a psychic touchstone. You feel you are breathing your life energy into the corpse. And in return, it's sharing some of its essence with you. Because there's always this connection between life and death. I just don't think it's necessary for anybody with a critical mind. As I said, I believe in the afterlife. I believe there's a whole cycle of life out there. And I just don't believe in a lot of the rituals that we associate with it. So what's going to happen? Well, I'm just going to avoid conversations with my parents on this subject and with my friends because I realize nobody's wrong. This is one of those situations. Nobody needs to be wrong. You're right to grieve the way that you want to. There's that old tradition of raising a toast to those who have departed, to absent friends, as it's very classily put sometimes. And I think that's an excellent tradition. Even though most people are just raising the glass, they're not feeling that shared energy. They're at least, participating. And some people are proposing it genuinely. Excuse me, past that, it's a difficult conversation. Because, like I said, we don't teach this stuff in school. There's nowhere really to learn it. And thus, the only thing that works is what you decide works for you. And I don't really, even though I'm suggesting there needs to be some sort of mortality class, and it is basically covered in school, but it's glossed over because it's a subject that does make people feel uncomfortable. And I respect that. Having been around too many corpses for one person in a life already, I do respect everybody grieves in their own way. That was not an admission of anything, by the way, to anybody listening to the algorithm and everything else. We need to remember that we're all human. We all have different ways of coping with things. And while I respect my parents going to visit the generations who went before them, it's just not a tradition I feel serves my life in the 21st century. With that, it feels odd to say I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show because it's not an enjoyable subject. We hope you found it interesting and entertaining. If you liked it as much as one can, please click the like button, subscribe. Don't forget to click the reminder button, the bell down in the bottom corner, so that way you can be notified every time we upload. And we hope you have a fantastic day.